Story 1. The Watcher. Rachel had always been drawn to quiet neighborhoods. When she moved into a quaint little house on the outskirts of town, she was thrilled by the serene surroundings and friendly community. The house was perfect for her, a cozy 2-bedroom with a well-maintained garden. The previous owners had been a lovely couple who had moved to be closer to their children. Rachel settled in quickly, enjoying the peace and privacy of her new home. However, it wasn't long before Rachel noticed something unsettling about her new neighborhood. She began to feel a constant sense of being watched. It was subtle at first, an eerie feeling that crept over her whenever she was alone at home. She attributed it to the adjustment period and the natural unease of moving to a new place. One evening, Rachel was sitting in her living room when she saw a figure standing across the street. The figure was standing still, hidden behind a large oak tree. Rachel couldn't make out any details, but the presence of someone lurking outside her home made her uneasy. She tried to dismiss it as a passerby, but the figure remained in place, seemingly watching her. The next day, Rachel decided to introduce herself to her neighbors, hoping to alleviate her growing discomfort. She met several friendly faces and was assured that everyone was welcoming and respectful. When she mentioned the figure she had seen, her neighbors seemed puzzled, offering no helpful information. As weeks went by, Rachel's sense of unease grew stronger. She began noticing strange occurrences. Her front door would be slightly ajar when she returned home, and she would sometimes hear soft footsteps outside her bedroom window late at night. The feeling of being watched became almost unbearable. One night, Rachel was awakened by a tapping sound. It was faint but persistent, coming from the side of her house. She looked out the window but saw nothing unusual. The tapping continued, growing louder and more insistent. Terrified, she decided to call the police, but when they arrived, they found no evidence of anyone being there. The next morning, Rachel discovered something horrifying. A message had been scrawled on her front door in red paint. "I see you." She was shaken and reported it to the police, but they could find no leads or suspect. The message remained a chilling reminder of the unseen presence in her life. Determined to find out who was behind the stalking, Rachel began keeping a journal of any strange occurrences. She installed motion sensor lights around her property and set up a security camera. Despite her precautions, the feeling of being watched never faded. One evening, Rachel reviewed the footage from her security camera. She noticed something disturbing, a shadowy figure moving around her property at night. The figure appeared to be wearing a dark coat and hat, obscuring its features. The figure seemed to be watching the house, moving with deliberate and unsettling precision. Rachel's anxiety reached its peak. She felt trapped in her own home, unable to escape the oppressive feeling of being watched. She began to avoid going outside after dark and took extra precautions to ensure her safety. One day, Rachel received an anonymous letter in the mail. The letter contained a single sentence: "You can't hide from me." The message was written in the same handwriting as the one on her front door. Rachel's fear grew, and she decided to take drastic measures. She hired a private investigator to look into her situation. The investigator discovered that the previous owner of her house had been involved in a long-standing feud with a neighbor. The neighbor had been known for his erratic behavior and obsessive tendencies. Rachel's current house had been a target for the neighbor's anger, and he had continued his harassment from a distance. The investigator's findings led to the neighbor being identified and confronted. It turned out that he had been watching Rachel from afar, driven by his unresolved grievances and unstable mind. He was arrested for harassment and trespassing, and a restraining order was placed against him. With the neighbor's arrest, Rachel finally felt a sense of relief. The oppressive feeling of being watched began to dissipate, and she could once again enjoy the peace and privacy of her home. Although the experience left her with a lasting sense of unease, she was grateful to have escaped the torment of the Watcher. Story 2. The Strange Gift. Mark and Sophie had recently moved into a charming old house in a picturesque neighborhood. The house had a lot of character, with its antique furnishings and large manicured lawn. They were excited to start their new life in a community that seemed friendly and welcoming. The first few months in the house were pleasant. They enjoyed the company of their new neighbors, who frequently stopped by to introduce themselves and offer warm greeting. Everything seemed perfect until they began receiving mysterious gifts on their doorstep. The gifts were unusual and unsettling. Old, dusty trinkets, faded photographs, and strange objects wrapped in brown paper. Each gift was accompanied by a handwritten note with cryptic messages. The first note read, "Welcome to the neighborhood. I hope you enjoy the surprises." At first, Mark and Sophie were intrigued but not overly concerned. They assumed it was a quirky neighbor playing a harmless prank. However, as the gifts continued to arrive, their curiosity turned to discomfort. The items seemed increasingly bizarre and unsettling, including a vintage doll with missing eyes and a cracked mirror. One evening, after receiving another strange gift, Sophie decided to investigate the source. She and Mark went door to door, asking their neighbors if they had noticed anything unusual or if they knew who might be behind the gifts. Most neighbors seemed as puzzled as they were, and no one admitted to sending the items. The situation escalated when the gifts became more personal. One package contained a photo of Mark and Sophie taken through their living room window. The note with it read, "I've been watching you. I hope you like the view." The invasion of their privacy was deeply unsettling. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, Mark installed a security camera outside their front door. He hoped to capture the identity of the person leaving the gifts. They reviewed the footage daily, but the camera only captured fleeting glimpses of a shadowy figure. One night, Sophie was alone at home when she heard a noise at the door. She looked through the peephole and saw the shadowy figure again. This time more clearly, it was a middle-aged man with a scruffy beard and a wild look in his eyes. He was holding another gift and seemed to be staring directly at the camera. Sophie was terrified and called Mark immediately. He rushed home, and they decided to report the incidents to the police. The police took the matter seriously and began investigating the strange gifts and the unsettling behavior of the man on the camera. As the investigation progressed, they learned that the man had a history of mental health issues and had been previously reported for stalking behavior. He had been a resident of the neighborhood many years ago and had a history of obsession with new residents. The gifts were his way of trying to control and manipulate them. The police were able to locate the man and arrest him for harassment and stalking. Mark and Sophie were relieved, but the experience had left them shaken. They had felt vulnerable and intruded upon, and the sense of security in their new home had been shattered. In the aftermath, Mark and Sophie took extra precautions to ensure their safety. They changed their locks, installed additional security measures, and made sure to be vigilant about their surroundings. While the strange gifts stopped after the man's arrest, the memory of the creepy neighbor lingered in their minds. The experience taught them to be cautious and aware of their surroundings. Even in seemingly friendly neighborhoods, they learned that not all neighbors are as welcoming as they appear, and that sometimes the true horror can come from the most unexpected places.